Studio One 4 has a plethora of effects to choose from, and whether you're using the artist or professional version, you're going to have over 30 different effects to choose from. And in this section, we're going to cover all the different ways that you can go about adding and manipulating the effects for your song. Right here, I've got a 4-bar basic beat set up. So let's go ahead and listen to that without any effects, and then we'll get started. So it's a halfway decent beat, but we can make it a bit better and add a bit more movement and depth to it by making use of effects. So as with many things in Studio One, we can drag and drop effects onto our different tracks, and it will be applied to all of the events on that particular track. So if I F7, we can access the effects tab directly, and we can see the Personas folder here. If we expand that out, there is a large variety to choose from. But I think I'd like to start with maybe a bit of reverb on our drone track here, which is basically just a loop. So if I solo that and play that back, okay, so there's even a touch of reverb on that, but I'd like to add just a little bit more. So I'm going to grab the basic room reverb. And at any time, we can click on the magnifying glass here and just type in what we're looking for, and then that's going to pop up. So even if it's not named, for instance, the open air is a convolution reverb, but reverb is not in its name, but it's been tagged so that will show up. But I'm going to go ahead and close out that search. And then we can just grab the room reverb from here. Once I click once on that, it expands out, and you can actually see the different presets that are available. So we can drag the thumbnail onto our drone track, or we can choose from one of the presets here. So I know that I want a larger space, so I'm just going to grab this theater preset for the room reverb and drag that on top of our drone track. Now this pops up so that we can make any adjustments to the parameters. But first, I'm going to close out the browser and let's just hear how this sounds with the reverb as it is. Let's take the dry wet mix up a little bit here. Okay, so it doesn't quite have the space that I'm looking for, so we can just click on this menu up above to try out another preset, and I'm going to go with the large tunnel. Now let's check that out. I'll press 1 to come back to the beginning of our loop, and I'll press the space bar to play back. That's more along the lines of what I'd like, but maybe a bit much, so I'll take the mix down. And we can always bypass effects by clicking here. So let's bypass and hear the difference. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that reverb. And you can see that adding an effect to a track is just as simple as dragging and dropping. We do have another area that we can add effects from, and we can take a look at that. The inspector by clicking on the eye here, as we've seen in a previous section. And we can see the inserts here in the center panel. We have our room reverb, and I can double click to access that from there if I'd like. And we could have added the effect from here by clicking on the plus symbol within the inserts. And then we can see our Personas folder here. And then down at the bottom is our room reverb. If we'd like to power off an effect, we can just simply click its power button. If we'd like to remove it, we can click the drop down menu here and choose remove at the bottom. Now I'll close out the inspector by clicking there, and let's open up the mix console because I'd like to show that we can add and access our inserts from within the console here. So we have that plus button as we saw in the inspector where we can choose an effect from. We can double click to open up that effect, and we can also just click once to access some of the basic parameters. Let me pull the console up a bit here. So the room size, we can actually click, hold, and drag to adjust that from here. So some of the more basic and important parameters we can access by clicking once on the effect within the console. I'll click once again to hide that. And actually I'm going to pull this down just a little bit here. One thing to note about the console is that if you are working in the small mode, we are in the large mode right now, and so our inserts and sends will be at the top of our channels. If we were to click this button here, then we enter into small mode. Our inserts and sends seem to have disappeared, but we now have these icons which will open up side panels. So if I click here, we can see we can access our room reverb here as well as our sends. So I'll go ahead and close this panel out. And if you take note up above, we have these 3 horizontal bars, and they will indicate when we have inserts, sends, and mix effects on our various channels. And I'm going to go back to the large mode. Now I think I'd like to add this same room reverb onto the snare 1 here. So let's unsolo the drone and play back with our drums. So I'll solo this snare. Yeah, so I'd like to put some of that room reverb on the snare 1. So what we could do is just click, hold, and drag that over, and then that loads onto our snare. I'm actually going to take that mix down. Okay. So another option that we have when working with effects and the console, or Studio One in general, is that we can apply effects to multiple channels at the same time. So instead of continuing to drag different effects onto each channel, we can take a group of channels, say our 4 coming from our impact, and you can just simply select one, come down to the end here and hold Shift and click to select these as a group. And then if I right click, we can choose to add bus for selected channels, and then that adds over here to the right. And let's say we'd like to apply some compression to our drums. So I will come to the inserts, let's choose the compressor. This loads up here, and I'm going to click on the preset here for drums, and I'm just going to choose the tight preset. Now when you're working with the presets for the effects, usually when you load them, they are not going to exactly fit with the drums that you're working with or the sound that you're working with. So they're a good place to start, but you'll want to pay close attention to the sound that you're getting and then make any adjustments to the parameters that you need to get it to work with your sound better. So let's hear how this compressor sounds with our drums. And I'm actually going to solo our bus for the drums, just so we can hear those alone without the drone. So I'll solo that, and then let's play back. And let's bypass. Let's take the threshold up a little bit. Okay, so we'll leave the compression as it is. It's very subtle. And it's actually bypassed. We can see once we have that bypassed, then the power button is going to be an orangish color here. And then as soon as we turn that off, we return back to that blue color. And we can also kind of test how it sounds here within the channel. So if I play back, so we've added a room reverb on our snare 1, and it was kind of a spacious tunnel reverb. But what if we'd like to put another reverb on all of the drums to put them in kind of a similar space? We can make use of effect sends instead of adding that reverb to each individual insert of each channel. So the way that we would do that is if we right click in an empty space, I can add an effects channel. Now that's been added here over to the right in our console. And then I'll go to the plus here, come to our personas folder. I'm going to choose another room reverb. And then this time I'm just going to choose a more subtle preset, say drum booth. I'll close that out. And we can see that that's now loaded on our effects channel. So I'd like to put all of the drums within that effect send. So if I click once here to select the first bass drum, I'll hold shift and select here. Now I'll come up to the sends, click on the plus here. We have our effects 1 as an option. I'll select that. And now we can see that these are, let me expand this out a bit. We can see that these are all going to effects 1. We have a level here that we can control of how much of the signal that we are sending to our effects channel. So let's then go ahead and play back and hear how this sounds. I'll press 1 to come back to the beginning of our loop and play back. And let me access the effects channel and actually put something on here that we'll really be able to hear. Okay, so then we can come over to the level here. Just trying to make this obvious. Okay, and so that's how we can go about making use of effect sends. And just know that here we have a button for changing whether this is pre-fader on or off, and we can just click that once to activate. And also know that we can use the fader here on effects 1 to control the level as well, so I'll go ahead and play back again. Okay. Okay, now let's finish up with taking a look at how we can go about adding effects to individual events within Studio One. Okay, so we're back with our basic track, and let's take a look at adding an effect to a particular event. And we have our drone here. I'll play that back. Okay, and you can hear how that ends if we have the loop off. But what if we like to add a little delay on this ending here? Well, what we could do is I'll select this event, then I'll press 3 to access the split tool. And I think I want the delay to be on this last portion here. So I'm going to click about here, press 1 to bring up the arrow tool. Now we have this event that's been separated from the original loop here. Now what I can do is press F4 to access the inspector. And when we have our event selected, we can see that room reverb that we added before. But we now have event effects, and we can click on the enable button. Let me pull this panel up a bit so we can see what's going on. We've enabled that, and we have our inserts here. So I want to put that delay on. I'll come up to the personas folder and access the analog delay. Let me choose something that will maybe be obvious, very obvious, long and spacey. Let's give that a try. Now this effect should be on this final audio event. So let's go ahead and play this back and see how it sounds. Okay, so we can definitely hear the difference there. And we actually have the option to render that event effects, and it's done so. So if I play back, you'll notice that our delay is no longer there. And I did that because I want to mention something important to pay attention to. I'll restore, and we now have our delay back. And the reason why we can hear that delay now is because it's being used in real time. Once we render it, we are printing it to audio. So if we would like for that delay to be maintained once it gets past the audio event, we will need to add a tail here. So what we can do is click here. I'll just put in 5 seconds, and then let's go ahead and re-render. And you can see now when I play back, we've got our delay. I'm going to go ahead and restore that, and I'm actually going to take the analog delay off, so we can click the down arrow and choose remove, and I'm going to pull this back in. And now I'd just like to finish off by showing we drug in the room reverb and placed it on our drone track, and we can see that here, but it does take up processing power. So what if you have a situation where you have a lot of effects in your tracks and you need to start freeing up CPU power? One option that you have is to right click on our track, and then near the center we have transform to rendered audio, so I'll go ahead and click that. We can choose to preserve the real-time state, which is going to make it so that we can come back to the state with the room reverb still active, but we're effectively bouncing down the audio and turning off the room reverb and freeing up CPU. If we still had the delay on our event, we can check the auto tail and have a tail included, and we can put in whatever setting we'd like there, but I'm going to uncheck that because we did remove the delay. So I'll click OK now, and our drone track is being transformed, and our insert, our effect for the room reverb has been printed to this, and we can see that it is gone from our inserts. If I play back, we can hear that it is on our track. And then if I want to return back to the original state, I can right click on the track in the track column, come down to the center area again, and transform to real-time audio. I'll click that. Now you can see we return to our room reverb and it processing our track in real time. Okay, and so these are the various ways that you can go about working with effects in Studio One 4.